This type of gown is where most shading goes wrong because the top and bottom shouldn't be treated the same. In this video, I'm going to break down exactly how I shade each part of this gown so you know where to place shadows and highlights and why they belong there. And if you want to go deeper on this, I've got a foundational shading breakdown that shows you how to place shadows and highlights based on light direction so you can turn any flat gown into a fully dimensional illustration. In one of my previous tutorials, we learned how to shade big voluminous gowns, the really full ones with tons of fabric. But this gown is different. It's more fitted through the bodice, and the volume really only shows up at the bottom, where the skirt flares out into a train that extends along the floor. And if you try to shade both parts the same way, it's going to look off. So let me break down exactly how I approach this one. First, we need to define where the light is coming from. I'm using top front lighting as usual, so the upper part of the burst will catch the most highlights. And the sides turn away from the light, so they'll fall into shadow. Now this gown has a crossover bodice. The left side rubs over the right, so that overlapping edge is going to cast a shadow along the rub line. We'll also have a bit of shadow under the birds because those surfaces face downward away from the light. This left bodice has drapes over it. And each one of those drapes will cast a little shadow underneath because each fold sits slightly above the surface below it, blocking some of the light. Now let's look at the draped waistband. This evening gown has a waistband with drapes in it, and just like the bodice drapes, each one will cast a shadow underneath. I also talked about this in my previous videos. This waistband doesn't lie completely flat against the bodice, it has some thickness to it. So it's going to cast a little bit of shadow under the bodice right below where it sits. And again, the size of the waistband will fall into shadow because the body curves away from the light there. Now let's move on to the skirt. We'll start with the sides. Just like the bodice, the sides of the skirt will fall into shadow because they turn away from the light. Now around the lower abdominal area, that zone between the waistline and the hip, we've got some creases. Because the fabric is a little snagged through there, it pulls and creates a few stretch lines. And underneath each of those creases, there'll be shadows. Now here's where it gets really interesting. This gown has flares at the bottom, and those flares are especially big at the back of the skirt train. There's a lot of fabric back there, so they create really big volumes. So if we want to represent all that volume, I'm going to use my heels and bellies method again. The raised areas, those are the heels. And the dips between them, those are the bellies. So the heels will catch highlights because they are facing the light. And the bellies will get more shadows because they are tucked between the raised areas where the light can reach us easily. If you're not familiar with this method, I've covered it in detail in my previous videos. I'll link them in the description, go watch them later. So the shading on this gown is honestly not that complicated. When you break it down piece by piece like this, the crossover bodice, the drapes, the waistband, the creases, and the flare train, it becomes so much easier. Every shadow has a reason. Some are there because the surface turns away from the light. Some are there because one part of the dress is sitting on top of another and casting a shadow down, like the waistband. And some are there because the fabric is bunching or flaring, creating heels and bellies. Once you think that way, you stop randomly darkening areas and start placing shadows that actually make the dress look three-dimensional. If you want to learn more about shading, go check out the foundational shading breakdown I mentioned earlier, because everything in this video, light direction, cast shadows, fabric behavior, builds on those fundamentals. Once you understand that, you won't have to guess where shadows go, you'll know why they are there. Go watch it on screen and I'll see you there.